talking about Professor Patricia Limerick. Patty, as some of you may know, is a MacArthur Fellow. She has taught at Harvard and Yale. She's been at the University of Colorado for most of her career. She's the co-founder of the Center of the American West, and she's currently the director of the Applied History Initiative at CU. She's smart and funny, just what we love, and she's here. So please welcome to eTown, Patty Limerick. Hey, you, Patty Limerick. Welcome back to eTown. Good to see you.
Thank you. No pressure, smart and funny. No pressure,
well,
okay.
So far so good. Willa Cather, she told a pretty good story. She told a good story about these pioneer women who had to endure all kinds of challenges and persevere, and then along with that, also have to sort of prove themselves twice as hard because of their gender.
Yes, and she did not stay to be a pioneer woman, we should probably note.
Yeah, she moved to New York with her girlfriend.
Yes, which was a great situation, I think. Maybe for everyone in that, I don't know. But, I would like to just say that I was brought into the closest relationship I've had with Willa Cather thanks to, brace yourselves, okay, Laura Bush.
Okay.
They didn't see that coming. They did not see that coming. No, they did not. I caught them by surprise.
There's a transition for you.
Yeah. And I'm getting back to Willa Cather in a moment, but I just want to say what I think the common ground that I feel most with Willa Cather, and I'm going to use an indelicacy, I guess, in saying this, that both in terms of where Western fiction writing was when she entered the picture and where Western history writing was when I entered the picture, I think we both sort of went into the men's room.
Yeah, that's
right.
right.
That would be indelicate. It was. But it's just sort of the moment of everyone sort of, what had right?
Did that happen to you when you were sort of launching your career and you were sort of a Western historian and you entered a men's club and they were like, what?
Well, club is better than my
men's room. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's go with club. And there was a women's club. You could write Western women's history. There was a group of earnest people working away at that, and that was sort of like the women's auxiliary. And so you could go over there and do that. But if you went onto the turf of Western history in the big picture, in the whole spectrum of ethnic groups and so on, that was did you know there's a room for your people over there?
You were breaking ground as well.
Right. So that's very presumptuous of me to claim that. But I think, could we time travel? I could go in her direction or she could come to mine. I think we would say, oh, that happened to you too, huh?
Yeah,
I think we'd have a few moments of that.
And not so much for somebody like Laura Ingalls Wilder, who was writing more from a woman's perspective.
Well, Laura Ingalls. Well, I'm flinching a little bit here because Laura Ingalls Wilder was made a great writer. Well, this is wonderful. Why would I be flinching over this? Her daughter was really the person who helped her do that.
Yeah.
Her daughter edited and sometimes just I think wrote things in. Her daughter was a very terrifying right-wing person. So when we start to sing the praises of Laura Ingalls Wilder, we're into a territory of affiliation that's, it's what it is. It's no one can say anything except that many children have loved the books. But the person who really made them happen she'd be on the presidential campaign circuit now, I'm afraid.
Which perhaps brings us back to Laura Bush.
Yes, it does. That's what a gift he has for bringing us back around there. So I had a sad situation where I got adult chicken pox, which is terrible. And people have actually died from that because the pneumonia. Well, anyway, so I'm stuck at home. I'm covered with lesions. I look like a textbook illustration in a dermatology guidebook. And
horror story, yeah.
Yeah, pretty bad. And then I get a message that First Lady Bush wants to be in touch with me. Oh, my goodness. We're going to talk I'm going to talk to a staff person on the phone, and it's interesting. You don't know whether you should know that I look horrified right now, but I didn't do that. Anyway, so I was invited to speak. Mrs. Bush, when her husband came into office, she started a series on writers, and it was brave. She's a librarian.
I was going to say.
Her first one was on the Black Renaissance with the Harlem Renaissance.
Yeah.
Langston Hughes, Laura Bush, doing that. Then the second one was on, I think, Mark Twain and race. So she was really not holding back. The third one was on Western women writers.
Interesting.
And I was invited to give the keynote address. So it was Laura Ingalls Wilder, Willa Cather, and Edna Ferber. So
Who wrote Giant? Is
who
that
wrote
right?
Giant.
Yeah.
And so that's a funny little side, well, it's not a side thing, it's kind of central. So I say, yes, I will do that, hoping to be not disfigured by the time I'm there, which I did get over it in time.
Or Contagious.
Or contagious, that, oh Lord, oh no. So, okay, so then I start reading Giant, which I had not read. I'd read a Cimarron, a couple others, but I'm reading Giant, and I get to the part where one of the characters says to another character, this is about rich Texans, one character says to the other character, you know, a man makes his money in Texas and ranching. Next thing you know, he thinks he ought to be president. And I think, Mrs. Bush, you haven't read this, have you? What are you setting me up for? So I did not quote that. As it turns out, a keynote speech at the White House is, I think it was 9 minutes. So
9 minutes, yeah.
You have 3 authors and so on. But I certainly did feel very close to Willa Cather in writing that speech.
Yeah.
And so many of the people that you probably saw last weekend, huge group of people from Red Cloud attending that event at the White House and just enchanted with it.
Couldn't have been a huge group because only 9 people live there, probably.
Yes, well,
No,
that's
1,000 people live there.
Well, thinking in their terms, I'm trying
Yeah.
to empathize with
Yeah, I
rural
understand.
America. We're all trying. Between J.D. Vance and
Yeah,
who
we're
knows?
not.
We're just doing our best
Yeah,
to empathize
right.
with rural America. So I was dazzled by Mrs. Bush. When she gave her opening remarks, it was clear she had read Edna Ferber. She knew that Edna Ferber mocked rich Texans. And so I've always just been, it's a terrible comparison, but they say that in old medieval dungeons that sometimes you would hear a distant tapping and it would turn out that there was a prisoner in there tapping.
Mm-hmm.
And having spent a few hours really in the company of Mrs. Bush, it's a little bit like that tapping in the dungeon that you think, there's a total person here. There's a total person.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this, I think I'm
Unable
saying...
to get out.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
saying that in a bipartisan way, that being
Yeah.
a first lady is really not...
It's a tough gig, yeah.
Yeah, right. So, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where were we?
Okay. In case you just tuned in,
Working on it.
I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but we're here with Patty Limerick, and we're rambling through some combination of Western and contemporary history and female authors and empowered women who are constrained by various things.
Yes.
Including
Yes.
their marriage and history and tradition.
That is exactly the case, and that has been a long, long story of loosening those constraints. And many of them are loosened. Now, good heaven's sake, I spend my time with young historians who want to reach wider audiences through this applied history thing. Dazzling young women doing extraordinary books, things that I just think, I could have spent hours trying to think of this question, and they got the question, and they have written a book that answers that question in ways that dazzle me. So lots of changes.
That's great.
Lots of not changes, though. So
Yeah, there's still a long way to go.
yes.
And some of these things are uniquely Western, right? Some of these constraints. I mean, I do think that in some ways, technology.
Yeah, good point.
Haley was talking about technology and its impact, particularly on young people, but it sort of ushered in a new gold rush, a new Wild West, a new sort of crazy power struggle that was predominantly male and was predominantly sort of avaricious and not particularly sensitized to human nature.
Quite. Depending on whether you have friends who are historians or not, that would be what you might think. But the whole story, that famous phrase, the West is hell on women and horses, well, okay, so how come on the famous Donner Party, where people were trapped in the Sierras and it was a desperate, desperate journey all along, proportionally more women than men survived the Donner Party? Frail?
Yeah, maybe not.
And on the Overland Trail, it was a very common thing for the men on the Overland Trail to say that they were in charge and they always drove the team. They drove the team. Well, plenty of diaries record the fact that they didn't always drive the team.
Yeah.
That sometimes they were sick. Sometimes they had to say, or sometimes they wanted to say, would you, honey? Honey, I don't know, honey's not an 1849 word. I don't know where I got that one. But anyway, well, just we'll just throw that in there. So, but would you drive? I'm just not up to it.
Yeah.
So diaries record that.
Right.
The image had to be, here is a really tough guy, and he would never ask the little lady to do that. So it is the weirdest thing how so much of what we think we know about the West is really what we know from Western movies. Everyone knows that. And yet there's something very weird there, because when people have seen science fiction movies, they don't leave saying, well, now I know what Mars is like. Oh my goodness, what a difficult group
That's
of
true.
creatures there. I wouldn't really want to spend much time with them, but they're fascinating to watch, and how they copulate. Good Lord, it's really quite something. But that's not, nobody's ever said that.
No one's ever said that, actually, Patty. Yeah.
It's
At
the
least
first
not
time.
any science fiction movie I've ever seen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there might get more people in there now.
But
So,
I think what you're... I think where you're heading...
yes, please take me there, please.
is
Yeah.
is that the fictionalized version of male-female roles in Western
Yes.
history are formed more by Hollywood than by actual factual diaries and other things. And the evidence suggests that women were in fact strong, if not stronger, and certainly as hardy as the men in terms of survival rates and other things. And so I just want to touch briefly on a new chapter in your career, because I now, as I understand it, know that you're also working with a lot of veterans
Yes.
who
Well, thank you.
are enrolled at CU
Yes.
post having done their term in whatever
Yeah.
ways and places they were sent to. And
thank
what's that about? I know it's not uniquely Western. I know it's not particularly historical.
No. Oh, I'm so
but it's a
glad you
new
asked.
chapter for
Yeah.
you to embark on.
And it will be chapters in a book that you must all intend to buy. I wouldn't try it just yet, but
Okay.
So I ended up as a wonderful act of Providence, a kindness of Providence. I ended up being appointed the campus partner for academic affairs for the Veteran Military Affairs Office, which is a better gig than what I ever had at the Center of the American West. It's
Yeah.
it is ideal to be there with young people. The ones who I've gotten to know early on had served in Afghanistan and Iraq. And if you hang out with people who did that, and then you have a moment of feeling sorry for yourself, oh, I have quite a hard job here, you think, shut up. Just shut up, Patty. So it's a wonderful perspective getting away. Anyway, the young folks who I happened to meet early on, who were history majors or wanting to be history majors, we got to talking about the experience of enlisted men in the last half of the 19th century in the Indian Wars. And I gave them some books about that. They could not look at a page without saying, oh, we know that.
Yeah.
We're familiar. That kind of officer. Okay.
I see.
So we are now working on a book. This is a title come up that one of the student veterans came up with called Costs of Conquest, costs plural. And I wrote a book called Legacy of Conquest, which is
Right.
quite a hit. So this
Celebrated.
is sort of the sequel to that, except that I have co-authors, which is a lot easier than doing on my own. And the point is to say that if the global war on terrorism veterans had this historical conversation with the soldiers, enlisted people of the 19th century, they would have much less sense of personal trouble or failure. They would know that separating from the military and going into a disordered society, which was what enlisted
Right.
men did in the 1860s and 1870s, that's really hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And what are you coming home to? And does home bear any resemblance to what you had? Does anyone know what you were doing? So we really feel that what we're doing could make a huge difference in the well-being of people that don't have, well, they have roots, but this is a really good one, to have a conversation between the soldiers of the 19th century and the soldiers of the 21st century. We're believing could really make a difference for some people who really deserve to have that difference made for them.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
great.
thank
That's
you for
great.
letting me.
And to sort of bring it, yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll pass that on. This is really fun. That's the first time that the young men working with me have gotten a round of applause. And they're not here with us,
Yeah.
but I will pass that on to them,
Yeah.
so thank you.
Are they? And so to attempt and fail to tie it into our earlier conversation.
Yeah, so we can do that.
It's all men that you're dealing with. The veterans
sorry,
are all
okay.
men.
No. Now I'm moving, I'm a total civilian. It is not an easy thing to be in the military, and that is true for men, and it is not always, but often even more true for women. So the let's hang out and tell stories, which is not an easy thing for anyone with that experience, but I would say there's a shift. It's not, well, there's a shift. And we now have, joining us in a lot of the conversations, we now have some extraordinary young women who are, I mean, I think I am tough. And
These are veterans, women
These are veterans.
Yeah.
These are women veterans.
Cool.
And they are remarkable.
Yeah, so it's both men and women, yeah.
But that's not, there's a lot left over from
Yeah.
from those experiences. But it's totally great. We have now several young women joining us who just light up the world.
Yeah.
They just are really something. So
Well,
that's happy.
somehow, I'm not sure we did it, but somehow we may have started out in Red Cloud, Nebraska with Willa Cather, shifted over to Laura Bush and her librarian skills and literary knowledge, and moved from there into the parallels between Afghanistan and Iraq and the Civil War veterans coming out to the Western United States, and then storytelling as a means of healing for veterans who are now in the Western states and enrolled in college.
I think it worked very well.
Did we do it? I think we did all those things.
We did. One of my proteges, a Marine, that's exactly, you didn't notice that, but you were bringing up his topic, which is how veterans have played a key role in what we would call the arts and humanities. It was not called that in the 19th century, but this protege is writing about the role of veterans in things like Wild West shows, but also in writing plays and writing poems. And so the way now that we see the arts and humanities as a route to healing, and you use that word, thank you, because you were telling us about Matthew's project when you're doing that. So I think it comes around that there's the whole, do you want to, if you've been through you're entering the men's club and we didn't want you here, if you've been through that experience, do you fold?
Yeah,
Willa Cather didn't do that. I didn't do that. Does it mean that society has reached anything like a workable state of affairs of accepting the fact that women are forceful and men shouldn't be scared of that?
Yeah.
Are we there? Well,
we're getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well,
thank you for your help in that.
Thank you so much for leading us on this slightly circuitous but very enlightening conversation. And thanks for joining us at eTown. It's always good to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. That's Professor Patricia Limerick from the University of Colorado. Watch out for her new book, The Cost of Conquest, or her former book, The Legacy of Conquest. Patricia Limerick.